Mrs. Lister, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Reverend Williams,
Present.
Dr. Mickelson. Absent. Dr. Morrison.
Here.
Mrs. Bowley. Here. Mr. Munoz. Here. Mrs. Stewart Campbell. Absent. Dr. Bonebrake. Thank you.
All right. Okay. We don't have an executive session this evening, so next is the Pledge of Allegiance.
We are so excited. You may remember that previously there was a question if Dr. Gray's child was going to be doing the Pledge of Allegiance. And we said they certainly would be at the very next board meeting. So we're going to turn it over to the Gray family for them to start with the pledge and also introduce themselves. Gray family, can you introduce and share your name? And then I'll go right on into the pledge.
Hello, my name is Zoe Gray, and I am 7 years old, and I attend McClure Elementary.
Hello, my name is Boone Gray. I'm 9 years old, and I attend McClure Elementary. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That was one of the best pledges I have heard all year. You were excellent. I believe board members may have questions for you, and I'm not sure if this evening, I know your principal, Dr. Gordon, has retired. I know you have a new principal, Miss Artser. I'm not sure if she's on this evening with us, and she may not know you too well just yet, so you may have to tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you want to do in your future. I'm going to turn it over to our board president to ask questions about what you want to do in your future. Mr. Gray, you look just like your father, Dr. Gray. Oh my goodness, that's like a smaller Dr. Gray. All right, so Mr. Gray, can you share, do you know what you'd like to be after you graduate from college? And Ms. Gray, do you know what you'd like to be after you graduate from college? We're going to make sure we hear you. I don't know that we can hear you quite well, so we'll make sure that the volume is turned all the way up on our end. And Mr. Gray, we'll ask you that question again. Can you share with us what you'd like to do after college?
I would like to either be a police officer or an astronaut. I've been wanting to do it for a long time.
Oh, for the many years that you've been in school. Oh my goodness, I can only imagine. You'd be a perfect police officer or astronaut, or perhaps both. Miss Gray, can you share what you'd like to do after college? And you are just stunning. You are awfully beautiful.
I would like to be a doctor or a lawyer because that's the only thing my dad will let me do.
Okay. Well, that is quite the answer. Oh my. Okay, we're going to turn it over to our board president and other board members who may have questions for you.
Okay, first of all, I just thank you for leading us in that pledge. And you guys are growing up. I think I've known them for most of their lives, as their dad is a very good friend of mine. Board members, any questions? Mr. Munoz.
Yeah, to tell us a little bit about your summer and what have you been doing up for the last few weeks?
Me and Zoe have been going to a summer camp called Christ the King Summer Camp.
We
And have you enjoyed it?
like to play around and go on field trips and have water days.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. Keep it up, and we'll see you here in a few weeks in school.
And well, we forgot one thing. During the summer, we also do swimming lessons.
Dr. Gray, are there any comments that you would like to say, sir, as the director who happens to be on the screen with us about your children, or any other final comments before we close out?
And the board, thank you so much for allowing my kids to be on tonight to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So in Braylon, great job. Daddy's proud of you guys.
Where's the little one?
Sounds like he's at school still, the smallest grade family member. For the two of you, I will say this, they are both honor roll students. Since Dr. Gordon is not on with us this evening, having retired, on her behalf, I'll share that they are both top honor students. And in fact, Mr. Gray is a student who is also gifted. He is a chess player and both are swimmers. So both are just outstanding. What is your favorite subject for Miss Gray? Can you share your favorite subject that you like in school when school returns? And Mr. Gray, can you do the same?
I like art.
All right. And Mr. Gray?
My favorite subject in school is science.
All right, wow. And those are two just amazing subjects to both be skilled at, in addition to your other academic areas. Well, thank you both for being with us this evening. You both did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
On the screen is your certificate. It will be delivered to your home by your father. Not everyone gets to receive that from their father, but you guys will, because he oversees a large area in the district. And so that certificate just was a certificate of recognition that says we congratulate you for being the students who presented to us this evening. The one that's on the screen, I'll just read Zoe's. Topeka Public Schools District recognizes Zoe Gray for your service at the July 15, 2021 Board of Education meeting, presenting the Pledge of Allegiance. And of course, Mr. Gray, you have the same certificate saying the same thing. Again, congratulations, and this will be delivered to you this evening.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a motion to adopt the agenda.
Mr. President, I move the board approve the items of business I move the board approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second? Okay. Any discussion? Ready for the vote?
Vote is open. Dr. Bonebreak, you want to just vote by hand?
So he's marked as yay. Ms. Lister, do you have all the votes that you need?
Yes, all votes are in.
Dr. Anderson, any school highlights?
This evening, we do not have school highlights. We will pick back up with highlights at our first meeting in August when all of our staff have returned.
Okay, thank you. How about public communications? Okay. All right. Having computer problems. All right. Next item is disposition of business by consent. Do we have a motion?
Mr. President, I move the board approve the items of business by consent as presented and authorize the board president or superintendent to sign a special project and purchasing contracts for and on behalf of the board.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Dr. Morrison.
I just notable that we received the Sheldon Head Start grant for the 21-22, and that's very significant. That they come and they scrupulously look at that, and so it just shows good leadership that we are able to do that. And I when I was president, I got questioned about the Head Start program. And so just want to make note of that it's very important.
Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, any other discussion? Ready for the vote?
The vote is open. All votes are in. Motion carries unanimously.
All right. That takes us to the superintendent's report, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. At this time, we have two items that we'll be discussing this evening. We will share that there have been many positive stories in the news as overall highlights for this summer, as well as we get ready to start the year. However, at this time, since teachers don't return for 2 weeks and principals just returned this week, we're excited to celebrate many of these individuals the very first meeting in August. One of the highlights that I do want to mention that's going to be reported on first is our summer programming. So we had an extended school year. It just concluded. And Ms. Wallace will give some updates about what that conclusion led to from the academic credit recovery end, as well as to the enrichment portion as we offered both this summer. Ms. Wallace?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. So tonight I will share with you a little bit of information around our extended school year program. We had, I think on the next slide, Mr. Gowan, you'll see several pictures of the different events and activities that took place. We were fortunate that our State Board of Education member, Ann Ma, visited Scott one day and toured our summer program. And then you can see we had everything from kids cooking and pastry to some science and sewing going on in our schools this summer. So as we look at kind of the results of that, summer enrichment and our summer academic enrichment and remote learning for PK8 had 625 students participate. Our music camp, 43 students. Native American Summer Camp had 51. United Way preschool CAP program had 72. Our special education extended school year had 84. And we had 417 high school students take credit recovery. And they recovered a record 479 classes this summer. That is more classes recovered in a summer program than we've ever had. We did do things a little bit differently this year. So it was a blended model with some online coursework with Edmentum, but then it was really supported and supplemented with teachers on site in person, supporting them and providing that extra tutor. And then these are just some of the comments that we had from parents. This is the second day of Super Science. My son loves this class so much. We appreciate 501's great teacher talents. This is a wonderful program, and I'm so happy that it exists. It was such a great program, and I'm glad we were a part of it. Rui enjoyed the first 2 sessions, animal science and art, tremendously. We hope to take advantage of the program again next summer. And those are just a handful of quotes of very pleased community around our summer programs.
So now that extended year just ended this past last week, we are gearing up for our new teachers who will be here at the end of this month. In our strategic plan, we would like to propose to the board that we will change the language from summer school to extended year. And over the next 2 years, we anticipate some opportunity gap closing activities with the ESSER dollars that we have, which funded this program as well partially. So we anticipate making some of those changes embedded into our current strategic plan. With the other members not here this evening, the other portions of the strategic plan that we do have to share with the board outside of curriculum is the overall finance piece, which really we don't have changes. We are going to be suggesting that we continue going paperless. And Mr. Robbins will give an update regarding finance overall, as well as any other operational areas, which would include human resources, which includes a paperless component. So we'll give that overview at that next meeting because I anticipate that the other members that are not here now would have an interest, particularly Dr. Mickelson, in the operations areas as well. And at the conclusion of that, we'll be asking the board to allow us to proceed with this being a living document, change the date, and continue on the road ahead with the items that we have already shared, with dual language being a focus, the opportunity gap closing for summer being a focus, and some of the overall operations picking back up steam with where we left off. Any questions about the process for strategic planning? And with that, we'll proceed to our next item, which is where we're spending more of our time, is the reopening plan. So the reopening plan was required to be posted in June prior to the board meeting. And so we posted the overall standards currently that the county health department and the CDC have in place. So their guidelines and guidance was posted as our overall draft plan. We did not make changes until the board had an opportunity this evening to have discussion. So at this time, we're going to go to the website so we can show our public and you where that is posted. The KSDE required every school district to post a reopening back to school plan at that time. Most districts had not had a board meeting in that span of time, much like Topeka Public Schools. However, right now we felt comfortable posting what we had last year and sharing here the updated Shawnee County guidelines and the CDC guidelines. Ms. Wallace and I will walk you through this document. Ms. Wallace will begin with the very first pieces of the plan. And then at the end of this, as we go through the sections of this, and this makes it easy for anybody to see it, the current guidelines. We're going to go back to those sections to see if the board would like to keep the guidelines in place as written. And right now they're written in the manner that Shawnee County has written them. So if we're going to make any adjustments, we will do that section by section. Ms. Wallace, you want to get started?
Absolutely. So the primary route of transmission for COVID-19 is respiratory, and masks and face coverings are among the most critical components of infection control and reduced risk of viral spreading. Increasing evidence suggests outdoor transmission is very rare. In addition, vaccination eligibility is now available for children and adolescents 12 and older. With that information, the guidance from Shawnee County Health Department was that students and staff do not need to wear a mask or face covering when outdoors. Students in preschool and elementary who are eligible for the vaccine or not eligible due to age restrictions should wear a mask, face covering that covers their nose and mouth when indoors. Students in middle school and high school should wear a mask, face covering that covers their nose and mouth when indoors. They do have the exception that if a student has a vaccination, that they wouldn't have to wear a mask. Staff should wear their masks or face coverings that cover their nose and mouth within indoors. Visitors and non-essential staff should wear a mask or face covering their nose and mouth when indoors. And the exceptions to those are exceptions to mask and face covering requirements must be made for those for whom it is not possible due to medical conditions, disability impact, or other health or safety factors. We can request a healthcare provider note for exemptions. Mask breaks should occur throughout the day. Breaks should occur when students can be 6 feet apart and ideally outside or at least with the windows open. Masks and face coverings should be provided by the student family, but extra disposable face masks should be made available by the school for students who need them. Reusable masks, face coverings provided by families should be washed by families. District and schools with families experiencing financial hardship and unable to afford masks or face coverings should endeavor to provide the masks for students throughout grant funds and other community assistance. And masks and face coverings should be worn by everyone on the bus during school bus transportation unless all windows on the bus are open during transit. And as per national and state local guidance, there are unique and specific mask and social distancing requirements for athletics, school performances, and other school-specific events held indoors and outdoors. And TPS will continue to follow the guidance provided. And this was what was posted by the Shawnee County Health Department on June 22nd.
We did reach out to Dr. Locke and we asked for updates to this during this last week. She did share these guidelines are still accurate that are on our website. She did share the exception related to vaccines for those that have received vaccinations as the other update to include. There are 3 other sections. They are somewhat short. We're just going to go through those and then come back to each section to see if there are any discussion that you'd like to have on those and any changes. Any changes that you suggest this evening or that you'd like to make and have consensus on making, then we will be making those in real time on our website this evening and sending out a notice this evening or Friday morning on the updates. Social distancing, we have listed as 3 to 6 feet. And if someone is on our website following along, on the very front page, there's a link that says reopening plan. And under that, if you click on social distancing, it says TPS will maintain the CDC requirements of 3 feet social distance in classrooms and will encourage social distancing of at least 3 to 6 feet whenever possible beyond the classroom. Desks will continue to be turned to face in the same direction rather than facing each other or have students sit on only one side of tables spaced apart. Any change in guidelines from 3 feet to 6 feet applies to the space between students. Spacing remains at 6 feet for the following: between adults in the school building, teachers and staff, and between adults and students. During activities when increased exhalation occurs, such as singing, shouting, band, or sports and exercise. It would occur in hallways, school performances, and maximizing physical distance to the greatest extent possible during school performances. The total number of patrons for indoors and outdoor venues will follow the most current Shawnee County Health Department guidelines. When masks are worn, a minimum of 6 feet of distance between performances and performers is required. When masks are not possible, a minimum of 10 feet of distance between performers is required. 6 or 3 feet of physical distance must be maintained between spectators, and bell schedules will continue to be adjusted to maximize social distancing. Those are all of our requirements on social distancing related to performers and students and staff. Ms. Wallace, do you want to go over the quarantine?
Yes. So the definition of quarantine is that Shawnee County Health Officer has issued home quarantine orders for residents of Shawnee County who have been in close indoor contact with a laboratory confirmed case of COVID-19 or have recently traveled to a location with high COVID-19 transmission. Close indoor contact with a laboratory confirmed COVID-19 case is defined as being indoors and within 6 feet for 10 minutes or more in a cumulative 24-hour period. Quarantine is indicated to reduce the spread of illness from one person to another. It is especially important for COVID-19 because individuals are infectious even before they develop symptoms. School nurses or designated school staff in schools without a school nurse will collaborate with the Shawnee County Health Department staff to identify students and school staff who were in close contact with a positive case and to quarantine them per Shawnee County Health Department guidelines. There is shortened quarantine guidance. Shawnee County has adopted KDHE's shortened quarantine guidance. Consistent with this guidance, individuals ordered to quarantine may choose from 2 options. Individuals who choose the 10-day option are released from quarantine on day 11 if no symptoms develop. Individuals who choose the 7-day option must complete a PCR test on or after day 6. If the PCR test is negative and no symptoms have developed, they are released from quarantine on day 8. antigen and/or antibody tests will not be sufficient for this purpose. And then please note, quarantine continues to be a critical measure to control the transmission of COVID-19. Individuals are asked to monitor for symptoms for the full 14 days and be tested if symptoms do develop. Quarantine modification for elementary and middle school settings. The Shawnee County Health Officer has approved the following modified quarantine requirements, which applies only to close contacts which occur in school or school-related activities in elementary and middle school settings. Close contact quarantine modifications will differ based on immunity status and whether individuals involved are students or staff. Fully vaccinated students and staff are exempt from all quarantine situations if asymptomatic. Individuals with a documented test, PCR or antigen within the previous 6 months are exempt from quarantine if asymptomatic. Unvaccinated students will be exempt from quarantine in the following situations. The close contact occurred with a student or staff outside at recess or at an outdoor athletic or other outdoor school-sponsored event. Masks will not be required to qualify for exemption. The close contact occurred with a student or staff in the classroom or during recess, gym, or both individuals were wearing their masks correctly for the entire duration of the close contact. Unvaccinated staff will be exempt from quarantine in the following situations. The close contact occurred with a student or staff outside at recess or at an outdoor athletic or other outdoor school-sponsored event. Masks will not be required to qualify for exemption. The close contact occurred with a student in the classroom or during indoor recess gym, and both individuals were wearing masks correctly for the entire duration of the close contact. Each situation will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis through collaboration with the school's district, POC, and Shawnee County Health Department. When indoors, unvaccinated staff should continue to socially distance by 6 feet from other staff. And then there are quarantine modifications for the high school setting. The Shawnee County Health Officer has approved the following modifications for quarantine. The close contact quarantine modifications will differ based on immunity status and whether individuals involved are students or staff. Fully vaccinated students and staff are exempted from all quarantine situations if asymptomatic. Individuals with documented test, PCR, or antigen within the previous 6 months are exempted from quarantine if asymptomatic. Unvaccinated students will be exempt from quarantine in the following situations. The close contact occurred with a student or staff outside or at an outdoor athletic or other outdoor school-sponsored event. Mask use will not be required to qualify for exemption. The close contact occurred with a student or staff in the classroom or during indoor gym weightlifting, and both individuals were spaced 3 feet apart and were wearing their masks correctly for the entire duration of the close contact. Unvaccinated staff will be exempt from quarantine in the following situations. The close contact occurred with a student or staff outside or at an outdoor athletic or other outdoor school-sponsored event. Mask use will not be required to qualify for exemption. The close contact occurred with a student in the classroom or during indoor gym weightlifting, and both individuals were spaced 3 feet apart and were wearing their masks correctly for the entire duration of the close contact. Each situation will continue to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis through collaboration with the schools, district POC, and Shawnee County Health Department. When indoors, unvaccinated adults should continue to socially distance by 6 feet from other adults. And then there is the definition of a household close contact. Any student or staff member who lives in a household where they cannot avoid close contact with a person who has COVID-19 must undergo an extended quarantine period. They will quarantine throughout the household contacts isolation period in addition to their own quarantine period. In other words, day 1 of the quarantine period will begin the day after the household contact is released from isolation. The student or staff member may request a modified quarantine from the Shawnee County Health Department if they are able to completely separate themselves from the infectious household contact. And the modified in-school quarantine may be an option for schools to maintain continuity of learning in a situation where all students and staff in a classroom are exposed to COVID-19. Modified quarantine will allow students and staff in the exposed classroom to continue physically attending school during their quarantine period as long as they remain asymptomatic. However, these same students and staff need to remain in quarantine outside of the regular school day through the entire quarantine timeline. A school district, through collaboration with the Shawnee County Health Department, could consider this as an option with specific engineering and administrative controls that would need to be in place prior to the modified quarantine being allowed.
The quarantine items have been read. You should know that the county health department determines who will quarantine and who will not. Therefore, that we really follow their guidance because they make that determination. We do not. But reading it for the purpose of the public who may be listening, so that they understand those pieces and know that that is in our reopening plan. The next item is COVID screening and vaccinations. Under COVID screening, we have down that Topeka Public Schools in partnership with Shawnee County Health Department will provide drive-through COVID screening at Hummer Sports Park and the north end of the football stadium parking lot. At this time, we are no longer providing that screening. We have moved to providing clinics, which is the next section. The vaccination clinics, Topeka Public Schools is currently partnering with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, KDHE, and the Shawnee County Health Department to provide vaccination clinics in our schools and at our partnering community events, like the Harvesters Food Pantry. These efforts will continue throughout the summer and fall semesters. We will say that under COVID screening, should there be a desire when school reopens in August to screen, we certainly would like to continue to offer Hummer as one of many spots that people can screen if they need that. So within our reopening plan, we would encourage maintaining screening and vaccination opportunities in Topeka Public Schools. So we'd like to start with the bottom section and move up in terms of discussion and or changes that you'd like to discuss and or make. Under the area of COVID screening and vaccinations, and my apologies, Ms. Walks, was there anything else under our reopening plan that we need to mention?
No, not as it relates to the safety protocol.
All right, under the safety protocols, as we go through these pieces, the first area under COVID screening and vaccinations, as I've already stated, we like to continue to collaborate and leave the screening and vaccinations. The only change that you may want to consider currently, that just the language that in partnership, we will provide the drive-through. We'd like to perhaps make that open to, we will make ourselves available for screening at the sites that are determined in partnership. You know, we've moved to having screening with our nurses. As you may recall, in our individual schools, they had COVID screening. So we moved far beyond just having it at Hummer. You may want to just consider allowing for screening to continue where appropriate throughout the district. I will open this up. Are there discussions about this particular area, about vaccinations and screenings, and any changes you would like to suggest?
Dr. Morrison.
I really don't have any changes, but really, you can go to Dillon's Pharmacy and get a vaccination shot any day at the pharmacies open, and you can be tested. So, it's very nice that we offer those things, but they are offered throughout the city all the time.
Absolutely. In fact, at the last vaccination clinic, which was our final vaccination clinic at this time, it was mentioned that they're moving to hosting vaccination clinics at churches. We are now providing the link, which is the KDHE link that tells you all the places by zip code. So that's really what we will be promoting. However, in August, if there's a desire and need, Certainly, we are not against continuing to have vaccination clinics or screenings as the need may change and adjust down the road. And if there is such a need, we have found it a place in which people, if they're coming anyway to a pantry and KDHE is looking for a place to partner for the community, we have no problem opening our parking lot on a Saturday morning from 9 to 10 as one example. But at this time, there's not another clinic planned, but we'll maintain it in our, you may want to consider us just maintaining the willingness to partner should they have a desire. Any other comments? And would you like any changes in this area?
I would like for us to continue that possibility for people to be vaccinated. I think the federal government now is doing a lot of outreach for people who are not going to the drugstore to get their vaccinations or spending the time to do that. Somebody that works 3 jobs is probably not going to take the time to do that, but if they're coming through to pick up food, they might stop and do that. So I would like to see us continue to just make it as convenient as possible for all across our city, but also in our public schools, and make it possible for people to be vaccinated if they're already there.
Thank you. So maintaining this from what's been said thus far from board members, maintaining this section, and the screening would change from screening to testing. Mrs. That's the terminology that's suggested moving forward as Mrs. Votter has weighed in terms of that particular statement. Yes, sir, Mr. Munoz, any changes, sir?
I want to echo Ms. Bowley. There's a social aspect to getting vaccinated. And when we have students who are showing up together, there's a sort of pressure amongst themselves that, oh, everybody's vaccinated except for me. And I think it's really important for us to keep that effort going in our high schools while we can. So.
Thank you. So what's listed in the draft will continue to partner. What's listed in the draft currently says screening. And while we didn't change it publicly on the site, what was suggested by Ms. Votter is to say testing instead of the word screening. And those would be the changes we make this evening. All right, moving up from screening and vaccinations. Quarantine, all of quarantine was read for you and the public. Again, quarantine is determined by the health department. Therefore, would you like any discussion and changes to the area of quarantine with those rules being made by the health department?
Mr. Munoz, you're thinking.
I'm still thinking.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bowley.
I do see several places where we have initials again.
We will adjust all initials based on your comment to state the actual item instead of the acronym. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Bowley. And Dr. Gray, as we update this particular document, Mrs. Votter can share with you what the various initials need to be adjusted to if that's a health term. And others can share that as well if there are some other initials that need to be changed. Any other changes or discussion on quarantining?
Munoz.
So it seems like the rules are a little bit different than they were last school year. I'm interested in how do we communicate in an effective way to staff, to teachers, to students, just the difference this year and how to avoid being quarantined, and how to keep us safe. Is there any thought to that aspect?
Yes, Ms. Votter is on the line with us. Ms. Votter, I'll ask for you to speak to the changes in quarantine and when this has gone into effect, and then I'll piggyback that, as will perhaps Dr. Gray, in regards to our communication for anything that we talk about with COVID.
Yes. Good evening, board members and Dr. Anderson. My recommendation would be to maybe update, last year about this time, we the district put together a handout that explained household contact, close contact, and what those situations look like. And it may be a good idea to revise that handout, maybe simplify it a little bit since we're more familiar with COVID in general now. And that would be one option. Certainly, this website is an excellent resource that I'm sure all staff could be directed to. It could be put out in the principal's update. It could be broadcasted in at various levels throughout the district.
And
And
Ms.
I also think that overall, pardon?
Oh, no, I was going to say, can you also, and once you finish that piece, can you also just speak to when this particular piece went into place, and then we'll share a bit about the communication tools.
Okay, yes, sure. The shortened quarantine guidance came out, I want to say March or April of this past spring. And it was in response to the health department believed that people were not quarantining because it was just too much time away from work and school. And so they weren't following the guidance. So the quarantine periods were shortened for that reason. So some of this has already been in place, the 10-day being released early if you have a negative PCR test without symptoms, or the 7-day option with the PCR test, rather, my apologies, that's what I meant to say. The 7-day with the PCR test and no symptoms. That came out this past spring. And so I'm sure many of our staff and patrons are already used to that verbiage, because we shared that with many people over the course of the spring and summer. So I'm not sure that's really a new piece as far as the shortened quarantine guidance is concerned. I think that's been in place long enough.
Thank you,
that maybe a refresher course might be needed briefly.
Thank you, Ms. Fowler. I just wanted her to mention that because it's so much reading that it feels like, man, is this different than before? And what are all the rules? Our staff will know these rules because these were the rules in March. But as we start off with Ms. Munoz, if you had a new kindergartner and you weren't in Topeka Public Schools and you just didn't experience this, you still really wouldn't know. And so on our website, Dr. Gray showed at his communications meeting, he actually created the one document that's the tool for how we communicate, whether someone has online services or not. We'll use all of those various venues without going through what they all are. The document that was referenced that we used last year about quarantine, that same document from March will be reproduced and given to families. And then when we have Meet the Teacher Night, now we have the document to give at the Meet the Teacher Night. We're just going to start inserting those things right at the beginning of the year, just to remind people, should you need to quarantine, here's a reminder of what that looks like. All the videos we created last year will still be just fine because, again, in March, this is what the quarantine guidelines became at the end of the year. Any changes suggested?
I'm sorry, I'm not asking about a change, but I'm asking about how this is implemented and managed.
How quarantines have been implemented and managed?
There's so many different levels now. If you're vaccinated, if you're not vaccinated, if you were outside, if you were inside.
Yes.
So
And-
how's that managed?
Well, and we've had a bit of practice since our students started being vaccinated during the school time last year. Mrs. Vowder, would you like to share in a little synopsis of how we managed quarantines? And it starts off with the health department in a Google form, but Mrs. Vowder, you're the expert in this area. Do you want to share that with the public and the board?
Yes, so how it works is we are notified, either myself or one of my nursing staff are notified of a positive case or someone who is a household contact or a close contact. And then information, we do contact tracing and information is gathered related to that individual. And then based on the health department's guidelines, a period of quarantine is established by the health department with dates of beginning to end for their quarantine period. And then that information is communicated with not only the family, but also the building administration so that the principals and everyone in the building knows this student or staff member should be home for this number of days, beginning on this date and ending on this date. So there's sort of a domino effect. Once one of us becomes aware of a positive case or what have you, then that begins our contact tracing and off we go to calculate the dates of quarantine. And that's all set in place by the health department.
Thank you.
Hey.
Any other questions, comments?
Okay, let's shift to the area of social distancing, 3 feet to 6 feet. And discussion or questions related to this area.
Dr. Morrison.
Yeah. Ms. Wallace, I mean, last year we went to the micro classrooms. Where are we with that at this point? I mean, 3 feet, 6 feet was accomplished with the micro classrooms. So 3 feet means perhaps we're going back to the regular classrooms?
Correct. So that took all of our additional staff to be able to do micro classrooms and to create that 6 foot or 6 feet distancing. Towards the end of last year at the secondary, we had shifted when we brought all kids back to 3 feet social distancing within classrooms. And so this is where we left off at the end of the school year and for summer programs, is that within the classroom, 3 feet of social distancing between students. And that is doable in all of our classrooms and maintaining our teacher to student ratios that we have set previously prior to COVID.
I remember last year that social distancing impacted transportation, specifically buses. And I wondered if you could speak to, will transportation for kids to school be impacted anyway with the 6 foot distancing?
Mr. Robbins will address this piece, and 3 feet is how we ended the year. So Mr. Robbins, can you talk about transportation?
Yes, Dr. Anderson, thank you. I can say that we never were really at what I would call a distance of 6 foot distancing on our school buses. We were probably at 3 feet the entire year because what we did was restricted seating to 1 student per seat. Unless there were siblings, then we had 2. So we plan to start the year still with 1 student per seat at our buses. So that would maintain a social distancing of about 3 feet.
Any other comments, questions? Ms. Bowling.
I know last year we put guards up on desks, sneeze type guards like we have here. Are we still keeping those guards in place in our school buildings?
At this time, within the plan, the way the plan is written, we'd like to turn this over for the board for discussion. We have met with the principals today, and we do have all of the sneeze guards available. We have collected those and sanitized all those sneeze guards. And for principals who would like to have sneeze guards on hand to give to students, they can do that. However, I believe the collective desire is to begin the year with the 3 feet distancing without having the level of restriction with guards that we've had before. The guards, while also helpful, also restrict visibility to some degree because they are plastic pieces that you have to look through. And where possible in smaller classrooms, there was 6 feet instead of the 3 feet in place in many classrooms. That being said, we have informed all principals if they or their families would like to have sneeze guards when they walk in a classroom. We certainly will have those on hand to hand those out.
Dr. Morrison.
Just one comment. I think pretty much sneeze guards are have been shown not to be all that effective. So my question would be to Mr. Robbins, and just to ask where we are on filters and air circulation and things like that.
We have what I consider to be a very good start as far as installing the air purifiers in our buildings. We have about 14 to 15 of our buildings that we have completed the full installation of the air purifiers. We have contracted or in the process, I should say, of contracting out rest of that work. That first work that we did to reach the point of the 15 buildings was work that we did internally with our own staff. Now we're going to contract that out so that we can speed up that process. We have all of the filters either on hand or on order to complete every building in the district. We have 200 remaining that we have on an inventory. We have already estimated that it's going to take another 200 to complete all of our buildings. And those were approved several meetings ago by this board. So we have every piece of equipment that we need to complete that district-wide.
Now, we would continue with the other sanitation and filtering in classrooms and the UV lights that we used last year, in addition to the new pieces of equipment that we've added to buildings.
Yeah, I want to thank administration for doing that. That's probably the most important thing is the recirculation and air filters.
Has anyone noticed how loud these recirculators are? I have some in my home and I have to turn them down. Even in order to read, I can't think.
We have not up to this point received any complaints about noise level as far as the air purifiers are concerned. So at this point, I don't think that they are a distraction in the classroom.
And it could be the size of the building, the size of the recirculator, and those matters. But we ended the year with them last year, and you wouldn't have known a difference between one building that had it and one building in terms of noise level that did not. In the area of social distancing, with the 3 feet being the social distancing, and where possible, if there are classrooms that are smaller that have greater space, 6 feet is the what's listed here, but 3 feet is the norm. Our board members, it looks like, do we have consensus if that's agreeable? And we go to the next section. All right, the next section is mask coverings, mask and face coverings. Once we finish this section, do know that on the left-hand side, we do have social emotional learning, instruction, and technology integration. And where, unless the board would like changes in those areas, we won't be reading every one of those areas, but we'll give a summary of each of those areas, as we anticipate many of those will remain the same. In the area of masks, we've read through all of the mask and face coverings areas that based on the Shawnee County and the CDC health guidelines. We turn it over at this time to our board to have discussion about what they'd like to see occur as it relates to masks and face coverings.
Dr. Morrison.
My only concern is who is going to be the mask police? Who's going to make sure that whoever is not wearing a mask is vaccinated? I mean, kids don't tell the truth sometimes. So should everybody be masked in that case? I don't think. I have trouble with people who choose not to be vaccinated and keep other kids from not wearing masks. And so I don't know. I'm in a quandary about the whole thing, but I do know CDC guidelines say that if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. But I don't think we should be the mask patrol.
When I visited one particular middle school, and the principal and the teachers were really good about encouraging this practice of mask wearing. Yes, there's a bit of it's tough to do, but I think observing them and then the way that they encourage individuals to do it and I think helps. It's all about the approach, right? And so, yeah, obviously if you're after kids, you won't get the good response. As any of us know who have kids, your approach really matters when you're trying to convince them to try and do something that they're not necessarily inclined to do. And so I think I've seen principals and staff do a great job of encouraging this practice in a way that kids can be agreeable. So what I'm interested in is, do you two as medical professionals still think it's important to do when we don't know who is and isn't vaccinated?
Dr. Bobright. Oh, okay.
I think we have to. I mean, it's not fair. But I think we just have to recommend everybody, especially, and thanks to Dr. Anderson for sending the Shawnee County blurb today about all of a sudden now we are doubling or tripling our virus cases just in the last 4 or 5 days from what we had in June. In June, we had 200, and just last 4 or 5 days, we've had over 400, I think. Yeah, and the ones my daughter is taking care of in the ICU are unvaccinated people. And so I guess we should encourage everybody to get vaccinated. If you're listening online and you're not vaccinated, go get vaccinated.
I will say, for those that are listening, I believe Shawnee County had a press release today that was sent out to all school districts. So you're referencing the press release for all school districts to ensure you had that press release regarding the COVID rates, most recent COVID rates overall. With that, we met with principals earlier today, and really this particular section, as you look at the guidelines of those that are vaccinated are exempt or can be exempt of the mask policy. You really are giving consideration to either an answer to your question, sharing that masks are encouraged but not required as a possibility, or saying that masks are required as a possibility. Those are all options, and perhaps you have some other options to discuss. And whichever option you go with, the school board attorney also has some considerations for you to keep in mind as you determine what you want to explore, if in fact you choose to go down the road of checking who's vaccinated or not, which for students, that would be quite a challenge to check every student at a high school or middle school. For any teacher to have that kind of health record, that would not be an option in the manner that would be needed in answer to your question. However, again, the two options that I've just outlined are two possibilities, and if the board has other possibilities, we're open to listening to those as well. We will also share that our vaccination clinics have been open to our middle and high school students, as you already know, but the public may not know that, and we do want to mention that publicly as well.
So I have two concerns. First off, as I move across the city, I find that no businesses are requiring masks. Very few people have masks on. And we're going to ask everybody to wear masks to school. So that's just a concern that I have, that that parents may not feel that their students need masks anymore. So if we believe they need masks, we need more education for the families to understand why their kids are showing up with masks on, when they're taking them into Walmart, Steak and Shake, and every place else where nobody is wearing masks. So I think we're going to have to really do some education there to help them understand, with the new variant coming and our numbers going up, why we think it's important. My second concern is, it is okay if what we understand it, that it is safe to go without a mask if you're vaccinated. And many teachers were talking about the difficulty in teaching all day with a mask on. And so would we be able to allow some space with that if they're, according to in here, if you have the space and you've been vaccinated, you can remove your mask. So will we have some guidelines on that if teachers feel that teaching in a mask all day is as difficult as they've expressed to me? Are we able to allow some guidance there to make that safe? Those are the thoughts in my head right now.
What's resonating most for me is that as a parent, I have always felt, even before I was a board member, that my kids were safe in school. Like, whenever it came down to that last minute decision of whether we cancel school or not because of ice, right, in winters, I always felt that TPS 501 would make the right decision, the safe decision for our kids. And so I think nobody likes to wear masks. It's a hindrance. And for a short while, it seemed like things were getting better. Obviously now things aren't. And so I think we have to be an example, and we have to, and kids will they've already done it for a year, and they'll do it again. And, we'll communicate that it's for the greater good, that for make sure that everybody is safe and healthy, that we all have a part to play in that. And so I think there's a bigger lesson there that we can teach our kids, and that we should encourage masks, because we just don't know who is and isn't vaccinated, both teachers, staff, and then students, especially our youngest. So.
I would ask, and again, since principals did just return and we haven't given them a required schedule to attend board meetings over the summer in the past, I'm not sure that any of the principals are on this evening. However, if they are on and would like to, and if you'd like to ask any thoughts from principals, certainly we certainly can invite that conversation if that's a desire. I don't know that we see any on at this time. And then the other piece I would propose, as you continue considering this piece and the most recent information that you received today and that press release that we all received across the county, that if this is something that you think bears further discussion with all members, we do have one more meeting before the school year actually begins. Although parents certainly are eager to know what is the direction moving forward, or what's the direction leaning towards moving forward as they make decisions and prepare for the upcoming year. Just throwing that out there for something to consider, but we just will defer to the board as we know you all may feel strongly from different perspectives, from parent to board member who has a daughter that works in the hospital. So we will leave this to the board for continued conversation, but those things might be helpful to keep in mind.
Well, Dr. Anderson, this shouldn't be a one and done thing. I mean, just like we got the notification today, things change and they're always changing. I mean, this may be a little blip and totally go away, and we may feel a lot more comfortable with perhaps not mandating masks, and then going to wearing masks only if you're not vaccinated. And that's that's just a very difficult thing. But I totally agree with you that we have another board meeting. I'd like the whole board to put their 2 cents worth. And I really appreciate Mr. Munoz and Ms. Boley and they're from the aspect of a non-medical viewpoint. I think, my viewpoint is, if you want to make sure 100% the best you can do and the least amount of transmission, then unfortunately everybody wears masks.
you want to just kind of defer until our next board meeting?
If the board would like to defer until then we
That
certainly
would be my
can.
recommendation personally, but
I think so. I think Melanie and Scott should be here to hear what they have to think. It might allow us some time to hear from a few other points of view, perspectives. And I'd be interested in Ms. Cope. You said, Dr. Anderson, you said she had some
items for consideration.
Yeah.
So your school board attorney will share some things that you may want to keep in mind in terms of consideration regarding this area. I will also share that if you would like for perspective from school leaders at the next meeting as well, we certainly can ask for the lead principals and or director of schools to be present. They are actually listening. However, again, if this will be deferred, then they certainly can wait until that time. Ms. Cope?
Thank you, Dr. Anderson, board members. These are really just some questions to think about as we continue to consider reopening and what the start of the 2021-2022 school year is going to look like. So my logical brain requires me to think of things in kind of a sequential order. So as we're considering possible mask guidelines in district buildings, I have it broken down essentially into 4 different categories. So we have staff, we have students, we have volunteers, and what I would consider frequent visitors, which would be contractors, delivery persons, maybe somebody who's doing work in the building that we've contracted with. And then we have infrequent or one-time visitors. And then underneath each of those, so then we have staff. We could have essentially 3 different options. No mask requirement for staff regardless of vaccination status. No mask requirement for staff who provide proof of being fully vaccinated, or masks for staff anytime indoors and social distancing cannot be maintained. Then same for students. No masks regardless, masks unless proof of vaccination, or masks indoor, no social distance. And then it's the same for the volunteers, frequent visitors and infrequent one-time visitors. What we need to consider is we don't necessarily have to do the same thing for staff and students as we would for visitors or, volunteers. We could lump more with staff or, put them more with infrequent visitors. But we need to kind of think about, is it going to be an all for one? Is it going to be kind of different tiers? So something to kind of keep in mind as you consider this. So will everyone be allowed to not wear masks in district buildings regardless of vaccination status? That's one. Should distinctions be made between staff and students and other individuals, volunteers, parents, contractors? And then finally, will restrictions on attendance at school activities be completely lifted? So for example, I don't think we allowed parents or grandparents to come and eat lunch with kids during the school year last year. Are we opening that up? I think we limited volunteers coming into the buildings. And class parties, school performances, those types of things, I think as we continue, that's a little, masks, are a little bit separate from that. But I think as we continue, are we introducing more people into the buildings? And if we lift those, how does that impact masks or no masks? So that was just as I have continued to look at these guidelines and what other districts are doing. Some have made distinctions, some have not. So just something to think about, that it doesn't necessarily have to be a one size fits all. It's probably easier if you do an all one or, all of the other, but just another kind of layer to think about. So nothing technical, nothing truly legal, but just a way of, as we continue to consider these, what this is going to look like for not just staff and students, but other individuals who visit our schools.
So Lori, I have a question then. The legislature has made it pretty obvious. They don't want vaccination passports. They don't want people to have to tell you that they've been vaccinated or not. And so legally, I mean, one of your points was we could require them to prove, and I don't think that'll pass muster. I don't know that, but legally you could speak to that.
Sure, absolutely. So hierarchy of how laws, work. So federal law typically trumps state law, unless state law is more permissive than federal law. So for example, if federal law gives you a minimum wage of $7.25, the state can pay you $8. That's allowed. But if the federal government says $7.25, you can't pay people $6.75. Okay. So one question would be whose law, if there was a law, would control or trump? I don't know of any controlling law in the state of Kansas into this issue at this time. The EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, so kind of the federal employment enforcement arm of the federal government, has continued to put guidance out throughout the pandemic in regards to questions we can ask, those types of things. One of the things that has recently come up is whether we can require as employers, individuals get vaccinated if they come, if they're going to be working here. So a requirement of a vaccination. What they have extrapolated from that, but have not given specific guidance to, is if an employer can require someone to be vaccinated, they can require proof of vaccination if the person doesn't want to wear a mask. So, for example, if someone says, I don't want to provide you my vaccination status, we would not be compelling anyone to do that. We would not be requiring that they provide that. It would simply be, if you do not want to wear a mask, this is an exception. You can provide us this information. If they say, I don't want to do that, say, perfectly okay. Then we're going to have to ask you to wear a mask. So the EEOC, while no formal guidance has been given, has indicated, since you can take that further step of requiring a vaccination, it's less of a requirement to say, if you don't want to wear a mask, you can, you don't have to do that. Now, if the legislature comes out with something different, we would have to look at that and determine controlling law, and those parts of it. So, to me, the distinction would be, we're not saying you have to show proof of vaccination to come to work, which would still be allowed. All we're saying is, if you don't want to wear a mask, you would need to provide us something that shows that you're fully vaccinated. Well, I think that was proposed but not accepted yet at this point. So no tattoos on the forehead. So, and I think it would be a situation where, again, as was mentioned briefly, a little bit of who would keep track of that. Typically, any type of health information, personnel information, typically that would be provided to HR at a district level. It would not be information that would be maintained at the school level. I don't know that, it's impossible. I think, there could be ways of HR receiving that information and then providing the information more to, the building level. I would guess that staff would be more manageable than students, just because we tend to know who the staff are. That's not going to change. When students are moving from class to class, it kind of becomes a little bit more of a hurdle. And also, adults are all available to be vaccinated. Students aren't. So I think it's just two different issues. But from an employment law standpoint, at least the indication of the EEOC thus far is that it is something we could do, but the state could certainly come in with something different.
With that information from Ms. Cope, as a reminder, we ended the year and had the summer with no masks when they're outside. That's currently in the current plan as a reminder for the mask piece when they are outdoors. So currently, the current guidelines as written by the CDC and the County Health Department reflect that if vaccinated, there is an exemption for masks, which it does state that's their guideline. And any change to their any changes or modifications that you like to make in light of their guideline, we again leave to the board to give direction in that regard. From what I'm understanding this evening, President Williams, it sounds like the board would like to have another opportunity before school starts to have dialogue about the mask coverings section of the plan, given the recent rise in the COVID rate, and to ensure that all voices on the board are also heard while also giving that time. Is that correct, President Williams?
I believe so.
Then we will bring this topic back again for conversation at the next board meeting. We do have other items that we're not going to read through verbatim on the plan. However, we will point them out, and we would still be addressing these in very similar ways unless the board would like to have changes in these areas. On the very left side of the screen, under social emotional learning, we click on that. We certainly will continue to maintain our mental health teams. If you recall, a few years ago, we put on the registration form a few questions for parents, such as, has someone close to you died over the summer, things like that, so that if they answer yes to 3 of those social emotional questions, we give immediate counseling. Had a student suicide since we've started that 3 years ago. We certainly will continue that. That's one of those things where we give eye exams, ear exams. I just asked, what about mental health? Put the 3 questions down and just took them from the ACEs, and that seems to have been 3 questions that have worked well for us. It also gives us good data so students can get counseling right when they first come in. So we're excited about maintaining that. Our social emotional services and resources for families are listed, and those would continue as listed. Moving from there in terms of instruction for all students, and if I miss something, I invite my partner, Ms. Wallace, to just address them as needed. In terms of overall instruction, this really just describes what you've seen previously in terms of general education services in the various tiers and what that looks like, including the summer program that we just spoke about and gave you information about in regards to providing enrichment and academic programs to close opportunity gaps. We also reference a bit about our screeners and our students with disabilities and sharing the general education curriculum as well as the alternative curriculum, EL, homebound services. All of those services instructionally would still be offered. This year, we are offering the program we piloted last year. This year, we're offering our elementary virtual for individuals who would like to stay virtual. We've always had a middle and high school virtual program. We've had that for many years pre-COVID, and we would continue that. And for those that would like to be in elementary, they have the option to select that if they would like that. We do at this point have the majority of our students enrolled in in-person school for those students who have enrolled thus far, and which would be somewhere above 7,000, 8,000 students have already re-registered, and the majority of those students have selected an in-person learning style as informational. Ms. Wallace, is there anything under instruction that you want to point out that is different than last year that you feel needs to be shared at this time?
The only item would be the Passbridge screener to assess learning loss. And that is, you approved that on the last board agenda, and that is a K-12 screener.
And it starts off with a new screener, so people know that that is a screener that we have to look at learning loss. Moving from there, in terms of health and safety, we'll
just one moment, please.
Yes, ma'am.
I see
go back.
acronyms again, like I don't know as a parent if I am going to get 30 minutes
gonna go
of
back to
push-in
instruction.
from ESOL teacher.
So the areas where there are acronyms, we'll go back and make sure that we list those out, including CI3T. So we won't update all those this evening, but we certainly will on Friday. Okay.
Thank you.
Now, thank you for pointing those out. So under health and safety guidelines, it acknowledges our coordination that we've just talked about in terms of our partnership. And we are just restating the hand washing techniques, and our cleaning and sanitizing would continue along with the ventilation efforts that we've made will continue as was previously stated. The next area under sustaining technology integration. Those areas all include the digital learning and digital equity areas, which you've heard Mr. Gowan speak about, as he is a leader in the world of broadband across the state. Our scope and sequence curriculum under technology really falls under Ms. Wallace, and those areas are still listed along with our ISTE standards, which are our technology standards. Ms. Wallace, have I missed anything, since that's instruction, that you'd like to point out?
No, you're good.
Under the final section of extended learning opportunities, which we referenced earlier, these extended learning opportunities are summer opportunities using ESSER funds, but it allowed us to begin summer programming the day after the last day of school, and we continued it. Well, actually, there was a summer extended experience that ended today in preschool. So we extended it pretty much all summer, and the schools, of course, for teachers will be picking up within the next 2 weeks. So it explains what those are, and it explains our before and after school programs, which we anticipate being underway again this year. Ms. Wallace, would you like to comment on any matters?
No.
With that presentation having just been given, that concludes the TPS Safe Return to School draft at this time. We'll leave it listed as draft and bring this back at the next board meeting unless there are comments or further discussion items that related to the reopening of school plan.
How often are we communicating with the health department here?
Previously, and starting next week, they pick back up with our Wednesday meetings. And so weekly, we have that with the county health department. Regularly, Nurse Votter throughout the course of the week, as we have reasons for health issues that people might experience. She communicates with them regularly, and she's our point person. Lastly, KDHE, as we're partnering, we've been communicating quite frequently, again, because of the vaccination clinics and partnership.
My last question is that last year, the county health department had a rating or a measure, a way for us to sort of get a sense of community transmission. Have there been any discussion with what's going on currently right now, maybe returning to that? Do you know?
Ms. Votter can address that if you are aware. Of course, our meetings pick back up next Wednesday, but Ms. Votter, has there been any conversation about the metrics that they used changing at all? I think she may still be with
No,
us.
there has not been any word. I'm here.
Yes, ma'am.
I say I'm unmuted. Yes, okay. Yeah, no, there has not been any word whether the scorecard was going to be started again in view of the current situation with the Delta variant. It's possible that they would start that up again, but I have not heard word from the health department, yes or no, about that.
All right, so when our meetings pick back up, we'll be keeping the board informed in regards to what we learned from the health department at the very next board meeting, because by then we would have had at least one meeting in place, and perhaps two by that time. That concludes our report on the safe reopening of schools, which right now we will be leaving the county guidelines as the guideline and the CDC guidelines until further discussion at the next meeting.
Thank you. We have 3 action items and I'm assuming 20.2 is going to be deferred, correct? So the first one is approval of the district reopening plan. Motion.
And
I would move to table that.
That's right. That's great. I apologize. So they actually, we only have one, and that would be 20.3, resolution 22-001.
I'm sorry, Reverend Williams, could we have a motion in a second to table that action item until the next board meeting, that first?
Yeah, I would move to table action item 20.1.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, ready for the vote? Thank you, Ms. Cope.
All right, I'm ready for the motion. Who made the motion?
Dr. Morrison and Dr. Bonebrake seconded.
And the vote is open.
you want to just
Your
it's-
hand,
move
yay.
your hand?
Motion carries unanimously. The item is tabled till
Yeah,
next
question.
meeting.
And that says possible at this time. So because it says possible at every
Yeah,
board
we
meeting,
just-
that's
don't
not
need-
one
we
that
don't
you'll
need
need
a
to move on, and we'll leave it as possible until we're fully ready to ask you to take action at that time.
Okay. Now we ready for a motion on 20.3?
So let's see, 20.3. Mr. President, I move to approve resolution 22-001 to exceed the revenue neutral rate as presented.
Okay. Is there a second?
Sue
Any
or
any
Ms. Foley,
Any
seconds.
discussion? Ready for the vote?
The vote is open. Show of hands, Dr. Bonebrake. Yay. Ah, you got it. All votes are in. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Relative to that motion passing, I'm passing this around, excuse me. I need everyone to sign in and then get it back to me. And next item on the agenda is board member comments. Dr. Bonebrake.
I think we need to teach our students to think critically, be creative, and work collaboratively. Not just the raw facts, the 3 R's. Yeah, what is Six Sigma and how do they work? We need to consider the quality of education over the simple existence of education. We can provide, we're making some baby steps towards getting a year-round school, but I think it's more than just the 3 R's. We need to help students make a difference in the world, inspire them to make a contribution. The world is unlimited for them. What do students need to succeed as learners, workers, and citizens in today's global knowledge economy? And that's hard to do. I think we need experts in their fields coming to classes. Just teach how to think rather than just recite raw knowledge. I'm done.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Morrison.
Yes, I think we just need to all remember that the science involved in coronavirus is always changing. And we just need to keep on top of it. I think that the district has done a pretty good job, an excellent job, actually, of keeping on top of that. So thank you for what you're doing with that.
Smoley.
Oh my, I thought we were going to maybe get a chance to open our school year as normal and not deal with this again, but as Dr. Morrison has said, it is just an always moving target. And I apologize that we haven't made a decision for everyone that's requesting one right now, but we will. And it's moving again. So those will definitely direct our decisions as we move forward. And we will get the leadership we need to make those decisions. Speaking of leadership, I wanted to thank our leadership teams and our CNA teams that are made up of teachers and people from our district leadership team. A lot of people think our teachers just vacation all summer long and get paid to vacation, which is a misnomer. Teachers are only paid for the days that they teach. And summertime, they come in and they work hard to build and create more extensive curriculum where students are doing Dr. Bonebrake. They are meeting people in their fields that they would like to look at. And we have a dynamic district. And an example of that, of changing the world, Jackie Ortega presented at the State Board of Education meeting today with her beautiful video. They were extremely impressed with how powerful that video that she put together was to the students around her, and it touched many of the board members today. We would be very proud of her presentation. She was very professional, very adult, and knew exactly what she wanted to say and what she wanted to present today. And she was a great representative for our district. She was just fabulous. And another fabulous presenter today at the State Board of Education was Dr. Anderson. And she explained what we are doing for mental health in our district and all the powerful things we are doing to help our students. And one of the things that is really powerful is the ACE screener we put in place at the beginning of every school year. As she mentioned earlier, in the last 4 years, we've had 0 student suicides. And that is like total opposite of the national data. So we applaud you for making those motions, putting those in place, because we're saving students every day. And your presentation was powerful and spoken of several times in the remainder of money being spent by the state to support those things. Also, one thing that we're going to be doing is there's federal money that's coming our way that the state is going to put in place, reading screeners and a lot of PD to help our teachers become better instructors in reading and diagnosing dyslexia. And it's going to be so powerful. We're all really hoping that it's going to take us out of the IEP cycle, where some students are diagnosed because of lack of reading skills. So we're really hoping that money is going to be a real powerful push to help our students be successful. Our new site. I am loving our new website. I would go on our old one and I couldn't find things I wanted to find. And they're becoming so obvious and easy to locate. I want to thank all the work that's being put in for that. I was an employee and I had trouble manipulating that website. So this is just beautiful. And I want to thank all that have made this possible. Keep up the good work, and I can't wait to explore more of it. Thanks.
Munoz.
I want to say thank you to those teachers and staff who were part of the extended learning, that summer program. I know my kids enjoyed it a lot, and they tried things they've never tried before, theater and chess and whatnot. But I also want to, as I saw the students that were part of it, I could think of so many other of classmates of my kids who weren't a part of it. And so I think as we finish this up, I want to challenge us to think, how can we be more intentional about those that we make sure we open these doors and these opportunities during summer. Part of it is the school being able to offer it, but also parents. I think we also have to try and think outside of the box of how can we keep our students engaged? How can we keep the love of learning alive during the summer, as opposed to all the other things that they could get, screens and TV and whatnot. So I want to, that's what's sort of resonating on my mind as we wrap up, is that there's a lot of, it's doing such great work and opening minds and ideas for students of how they might see themselves in a different way. So that's one. The second thing I wanted to say is just, we had a number of good weeks. We finished off the school with the low transmission and everything trending in a great way. And so I'm fearful that we let our guard off just a little. And that's all of us, it's natural and it's normal. But I think we do have to be vigilant. And if parents, if you want your kid to have as normal as a school year as possible, it means that we all have to try and do those things, those small things that make a big difference in the largest grand scheme of things. So I would encourage individuals to practice those safety measures necessary. Other than that, I hope our teachers are resting, and that and I know that our principals are back, and so they're back at it, and I hope that they're ready to go and start a new school year. We look forward to working with you and hearing from you in 2 weeks of how you think we should proceed in this new school year as far as this our plan. And I think that's about it.
Hey, excuse me. I want to personally, first of all, thank Ms. Ortega with Highland Park High School for her presentation. I saw on Facebook a report of how well she did. I will attribute a lot of that to her last name, Ortega. My mother was an Ortega, and so I think it goes with the name. Also, every time I sit at the opportunity to sit behind our desk when we convene for a board meeting, I always look at our mission: engage, prepare, and inspire. And I embed that in any communication that I send out to anybody. And I encourage all of those that are, whatever role you play in Topeka Public Schools, family, and on behalf of our students, that just keep that in mind, because on those dark days when things get hard and the clouds hang low, that you're doing a great job, and years from now, our students will look back and appreciate what you did on their behalf. And with that, are there any other business before this body? If not, we stand adjourned.